Welcome to another episode of Jazzy Talk, Season 6. We are here with the winner of the Jazzy Logan Auto-Qualifier, none other than Yogurt Brain. Yogurt Brain, this has been a long time coming. I have been looking forward to our conversation. You haven't really done anything like this before, so I am super excited to give everyone in the Third Strike scene an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And so, welcome to Jazzy Talk.
Thank you. It was a tremendous honor, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
So, Yogurt, you finally won the big one. Jazzy Logan Arcade Auto-Qualifier.
Yes.
Tell me what that was like, because you've been competing in Third Strike for the last 3 or 4 years, I think.
When I think about it, it's kind of fucked up, honestly, because I started playing like towards the tail end of 2018,
Okay.
which would have been like after 30th collection came out. Um, but I've been competing like since season 1 of Jazzy, pretty much. Back when we used to have this spot near the Chicagoland area in one of the suburbs called the Candy Cave. I'm pretty sure we did like ranking events there during season 1. I miss that place. That place was it was epic. It was like a Mexican restaurant, candy store, and just like hella cabs. It was really dope.
So, yeah, tell me a little bit more about what that experience was like, finally winning a Jazzy Auto-Qualifier. You had mentioned that you've been competing in Jazzy since its inception, and so how did that feel like, finally breaking through and becoming a finalist? You qualified through points last season, but you punched your ticket by winning an Auto-Qualifier, and so what was that experience like for you?
It was definitely surreal. I think the closest I had ever come prior to this would have been at the Indianapolis auto qualifier that they had at Boss Battle Games, which I think that was in three? Season 3 or 4 maybe. Um, but yeah, I don't know, it definitely took a couple days for it to really hit that I'd done something, like, kinda significant with this win, but it meant a lot to me for sure, especially with it being at Logan Arcade. You know, those are my guys for sure, so, but that day fucking sucked for me. I woke up late, I probably almost got DQ'd, traffic was terrible. It was the longest drive I've ever taken to Logan. It took me, like, over 2 hours to get there, when normally it takes me, like, an hour and 30, but traffic was just so trash for, anybody who has driven from outside of Chicago into Chicago, I'm sure you understand. There's, like, a 10-mile radius outside of the city where no matter what direction you're coming from, it is just awful. But, yeah, I made it, fortunately. Um, they were having a little bit of technical difficulties, so they started a little bit late, and I left super early anyway. And, yeah, I made it on time, did not get DQ'd, but I was so tired. I was exhausted. I worked third shift, so I, like, had to kind of invert my schedule a little bit and just, like, wake up mad early for me. But, yeah, I was just locked in.
How confident were you going into the event?
Uh, to be honest, like, not much. I didn't feel, like, super confident. I definitely was not, like, anticipating winning or anything like that. Um, the Logan guys who I was expecting, them all to be in attendance pretty much, we have cultivated a lot of really strong players, and I feel like any one of them can beat me if they're having a good day or if I'm having an off day, whatever. They're all they're all scary in their own way. And I didn't realize that Poe was coming too. Poe, obviously, strong player from the New York scene. Um, yeah. I think maybe like one of the glaring omissions from that tournament was Big Red was not there. Big Red, my demon, my bracket demon. Dude, I always worry about when I have to fight him, but I would say I was feeling like a 7 or 8 out of 10 on the confidence scale going into that, which I think, I guess that's pretty high.
I like that you mentioned Big Red because you were saying that he was your demon, and I think the last big Dirt Strike event before the auto qualifier that you participated in was Frosty Faustings, where you came in second to Big
Yes.
Red after Big Red resetted the bracket. I don't want to dredge up too much of that. It must have been a pretty, I don't know. I kind of have an understanding of how competitive you are, so that must have been a pretty painful experience. But something similar happened to you at the Jazzy Logan Auto-Qualifier. I love that you mentioned Poe, because when I think about the last 7 years and the history of Jazzy, I feel like you and Poe are sort of the case examples of what Jazzy is all about. Encouraging players to get better and to travel and to really be like world warriors, because in the past you've traveled before. Poe has been traveling a lot this season,
Mm.
and so I couldn't help but smile when it ended up being you and Poe in grand finals. But something similar happened to you at the Logan Auto Qualifier. You weren't able to beat Poe in grand finals, and so he reset the bracket. And so did you learn anything? Because I'm not gonna lie, when that happened, I immediately thought Frosty, and I was like, and we have the cameras, we have the player cameras, and so I'm kind of reading your body language. And so, well, like, what was that like when Poe managed to reset the bracket? Like, what was going through your mind when that happened?
Uh, Pretty much the exact same thing that you described. It's just like, "Oh, fuck, not again."
Were you already thinking about Frosty before, like, did you think about Frosty before you entered grand finals with Poe? Did you start thinking about Frosty when Poe started kind of looking like, oh, okay, this he might reset the bracket? Like, when did the thoughts of Frosty start popping up, if you remember, during that set?
Yeah, I would say probably maybe when I was down, like, when he'd won his 2nd game, I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, he could definitely reset this. I need to I need to focus on my mental strength right now and just try to collect and, stand strong." And, yeah, then he had reset it, and then I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm fucking up. I need to chill." I think I was just in that moment, I was just kinda getting hit by stuff, and good on him, like, he was finding a lot of gaps where he could sneak in tattoos and stuff and disrupt my offense. Um, and once I had kind of realized that, it was just a matter of relaxing or just trying to relax, deep breaths, taking some time in between each game, um, deep breaths between rounds, that sort of thing, in order to find that composure. But yeah, I was definitely thinking about Frosty. Katie had mentioned that to me too, and I think Envy as well. They were like, "Yeah, we saw you smile and do like a big deep sigh once he had reset the bracket, and we were worried that was gonna be another situation like that." And I definitely was too. I definitely was too. It's hard to forget a loss like that where you get reset. Those are extremely painful. They sting for a while, for sure.
And so what did you do differently when Poe reset the bracket from when Big Red reset the bracket, if anything? Because you had mentioned that you kind of took your time and you smiled. Because I definitely don't think you smiled after Big Red reset the bracket at Frosty. At least I don't remember. I have to go back to the tape. But you looked stressed, like you were like, "Ah, no." Um,
Yeah, I was super bummed when Will Big Red reset the bracket at Frosty. I think at that point I was just kind of resigned, which is a terrible mindset to have when you're on the big stage, literally like in grand finals, especially after a reset. I mean, if there's any time to try to compose yourself and rise to the occasion, it is then, and I definitely failed that day. So I was disappointed in myself in that regard, but I think it was certainly a learning experience because I realized that, I lost to myself that day. Like, Will, I think, was the better player, and he deserved the win, but he just had the fortitude to, because, I mean, our first set at Frosty in grand finals, it was 3-2. So I was right there, I was right on the cusp, but he fought hard and he didn't give up. He just kept going, and once he had cultivated that momentum, it was just difficult for me to even think of like a strategy or switching up my approach or anything like that. He was just, yeah, he was very dominant. And so I think when the same thing had happened versus Poe, I just tried to consider how painful that moment was and just take a step back outside of where I was at that time and think about what I needed to do differently in order to avoid feeling that heartbreak again, pretty much. And for me at that time, it was just slow down. I was just playing at a pace that I wasn't comfortable with, which I think was ultimately trying to match Poe's, and it just was not working. So just try to take a little bit more control and impose my pace, and it ended up working out for me.
How familiar were you going into that set with the Ibuki Goki matchup? Because one of the another reason why I was really happy to see that it was you and Poe in grand finals is because I know a little bit about both your scenes, and not to knock any of the Ibuki players in the New York scene or the Goki players in the Chicago scene, but I think it might be safe to say that at least for sure in New York, we don't really have a whole lot of dedicated Ibuki mains in that scene. I think really the closest that we have is Maximilian, who is really a transplant, uh, originally from the Pacific Northwest. And then when I think about Goki players in Chicago, I really can't think of any like super dedicated Goki mains in Chicago, or at least ones that are on your level, respectfully. So yeah, like that's why I really liked that grand finals because I was thinking, okay, we're going to find out like how well they know the matchup because it definitely seemed like there was a feeling out process in that first set. But tell me what your thinking was going into that match. You had mentioned that you had no idea Poe was even coming, and so what was your comfort level with the Goki matchup? Was that even on your mind? Were you just thinking I'm going to play the player, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, I would say I definitely feel pretty comfortable in the Goki matchup. I like that matchup quite a bit, actually. It's fun to me because they're actually, I believe the Buki SA3 is actually very strong versus Goki, and so sometimes, depending on the player, I do like to pick that. It can punish a lot of traditional like Shoto stuff, and you can actually hit confirm it if you link the two crouching shorts. So it also just does a shitload of stun, which obviously against Goki is very, very useful. Um, but you really can't beat the utility of Ibuki SA1. So I don't know. I've experimented with it a bit. I've got a lot of playtime against a lot of different Goki players. Eat, of course. Shout out Eat. We've played a ton. Um, Number one Goki on Fightcade, aka Lava Heart. Shout out Lava Heart. And we have a couple of Goki players in Chicago right now. They're on the up and up, I would say. Astro, aka Orochi Tom Cruise, and Seno. I really like how those two play. But yeah, I was more focused on like trying to determine what kind of game Poe was going to show me that day because he in the canon of Goki players, like American Goki players, he is definitely the most unpredictable, I would say. Like, I would say right now, Luke is probably the strongest Goki in the US. Um, Therapist came out to a tournament this season, I believe. Maybe it was last season. And he's really, really sick too, of course, legend. But Luke has a much more methodical style than Poe, I would say. And this is not a knock against Poe or anything like that. But one of Poe's strengths, like I said, is just he just manages to find these crazy gaps in your offense where he can just bust out a Tatsu and it kind of fucks up your rhythm. And I was not really expecting that. I've played Poe a good bit, but it was mostly online. And um I think when we played at Logan that day, he showed me that he was a lot more prepared for the Ibuki matchup. And we had talked after the set and stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, like, I was really grinding um and trying to lab out the Ibuki matchup because I had a feeling we would have to play. So salute him for doing that dirty work and trying to prepare himself." But yeah, I don't know. I've just played so much against Goki and I like the matchup a lot. And I do think Ibuki is pretty good against Goki. Like a lot of characters in the cast, Goki can just kind of let the Tatsus rip. And you either have to find a red parry or get some sort of reversal timing, like whether it's a super or whatever. He can really abuse a lot of characters in the cast, but Ibuki fortunately can just crouch under like any Tatsu that's not light Tatsu and get a full punish. And if they end up crouching, you get the crouching damage on Goki, huge stun. So that could be kind of a rough one, I think.
Yeah, I like the matchup because, like you mentioned earlier, both of you or both of your characters are on the lower end of the life bar spectrum. So it feels like every opportunity, every encounter, every exchange means so much. So I really enjoyed watching that set and how, like you were saying, both of you were trying to pick your spots because you knew, like, there were times when, perhaps maybe you could have executed better punishes, but for the most part, it seemed like both of you understood just how important every interaction is because of the limitations of both your characters. Like you said, Goki has the low stun, low health, Ibuki, the low health. And so it really felt super exciting. Like both of you were just one encounter away from winning the round. And to me, that's one of the more enjoyable kinds of Third Strike to watch.
Yes,
And
definitely super volatile.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, congratulations on winning the Jazzy Logan Auto-Qualifier. I think defeat was even sweeter because of who you had to defeat in Poe, and so thank you for an entertaining set. Who knows? Poe may still get the run back at the finale. Uh,
Yes. Yes. I look forward to watching his pool at the LCQ.
yeah. So let's kind of turn the clock back a little bit. You've never really done any kind of podcast or interview before. And so I want you to take us back, all the way back. How did you get into gaming or fighting games or Dirt Strike? Like, how did you get into this sphere in general?
Yeah, so I attribute it largely to my older brother. Um, I'm the youngest of 5, and my younger older brother, he's like 11 years older than I am. And so growing up, I was kind of his shadow, basically. And so I'm very grateful that he entertained that. Like he allowed me to, even though I was just like little bro, he let me hang out with him and his friends. And I didn't talk much when I was a kid. So I was mostly just kind of a fly on the wall, but he was a big PC gamer. Like he was really into StarCraft, OG Dota, Counter-Strike, and of course, he was a big JRPG fan as well. So I was kind of just like on the hand-me-down end of playing Super Nintendo RPGs like, Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, and then like PS1 JRPGs. A big Final Fantasy Tactics fan. I know that's a common thing amongst Third Strike players is we seem to all have a huge appreciation for Final Fantasy Tactics. But yeah, I think probably playing Counter-Strike was my first hand at like a competitive style like online video game. And I guess I do kind of have a funny story about how I got into like fighting games though specifically. So when I was a senior in high school, I think the Smash Doc had just come out. So everybody collectively grown together listening. Um but yeah, I'd say my first like truly competitive like IRL type of game would have been Melee. But yeah, a bunch of my friends in high school, we had consecutive TA hours, and one of us found a CRT on the side of a road on trash day, and we brought it to school. And one of the teachers that I TA for, he was a anatomy bio teacher, so his classroom was pretty big, and he had like a lab closet type of thing. So we brought the CRT and the GameCube in there, and we would just play like hella Melee during school, like sitting on buckets of fetal pigs and shit like that for like, the lab gear. And yeah, after that though, I didn't take it like that seriously, but I mostly just played with like guys that were local to me and like people that I was already friends with. But we like to watch it for sure. It was it's a very exciting game to watch, of course. But then after that, like I remember getting a Switch and I got Ultra Street Fighter 2, which I don't, definitely a dark horse in the Street Fighter 2 canon, but it had online play, and I remember playing that quite a bit and enjoying it, and it just evoked a nostalgia from growing up playing video games with my brother, Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo. And so, believe it or not, I actually bought a stick to play ST of all games. It just created an intrigue playing that. I didn't even know, like, ST was a game. Like, I didn't know what version of Street Fighter 2 people continued to play. And then I discovered like the Super Turbo Saturday videos with Damn Die and like El Trouble. And I was just learning about the tech and watching like the Tournament of Legends, American tournament footage, Damn Die, John Choi, learning about those guys, Alex Valle, of course, just like OG um like retro game legends from the US. And then I learned about like the Japanese scene and yeah, I got my stick. I remember trying Third Strike on the original Fightcade, and I did not like it at all. It was like I picked Makoto, and she was so slow. And playing Street Fighter 2, I wasn't used to having a dash, of course. So like in hindsight, it's like the idea of Makoto being slow is just completely outrageous. But yeah, the mobility options available in Third Strike that did not exist in Street Fighter 2 were kind of overwhelming at the time, which is also funny in hindsight. But I sucked at Street Fighter 2, man. Like I could not hang with any of those guys that were on Fightcade back then. And the fucking kicker though was I couldn't DP on stick in Street Fighter 2. I just couldn't do it. I could only do it if you did like the double quarter circle forward motion, but it just wasn't fast enough. Like I couldn't do that. Couldn't do the stick travel time. And then I tried it in Third Strike a couple months later, and I was like, oh yeah, the input leniency seems to be a lot more reasonable in this game. And so, yeah, I started playing that on 30th Collection. I was a Ryu main originally.
Is that on Switch?
No, 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 no. That was on PC when
Okay.
30th came out.
You did mention that you got Ultra Street Fighter Switch, right? That what you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I only played that on Switch because I think that game was a Switch exclusive.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not like the whole time, but I think when it first came out, yeah, and that game was pretty silly. In hindsight as well.
Well,
Very silly game.
I think it's kind of cool that 30th is on the Switch
Yeah, yeah.
because I can't think of
Yeah,
any other like handheld version that where the experience of playing Third Strike is as good as playing on the Switch. like the
Yes.
portability of it. Like, I guess you could. I haven't tried 30th on the what is the portable Steam called? Forgot what the
The Steam
portables.
Deck.
The Steam Deck. I don't haven't tried 30th on the Steam Deck, but I have a Switch and I have 30th on it, and it plays pretty well. Uh,
Yeah, I remember seeing people like bring it on airplanes and stuff to like practice.
yeah. So it's really cool that you and first of all, no one can deny the Smash pipeline, the Third Strike. This is something that has been well documented. A lot of our newer players, newer generation of players like yourselves, have come from the Smash scene and Melee in particular. But it's super interesting to learn that you started out with Ultra Street Fighter and 2 and eventually ST. Who did you main in ST, or who were you using in that game?
So I tried to play Old Hawk
Okay.
because I watched the Super Turbo Saturday video where they went over like the OS, and I obviously could not pull that shit off, let alone, consistently in like a match environment. But I tried, and then when I realized that wasn't gonna happen, I picked old Ryu because I thought Damned Eye was really sick.
Yeah.
And then I learned that the old characters are kind of frowned upon.
So you had mentioned that when you first started playing ST, you dropped names like Damn Die, El Trouble, Valle, Choi. Uh, how much of getting into fighting games was triggered by your interest in like the community of it? Because it seems like you were someone who like really kind of did a deep dive and like went, okay, what's the history of this game? Like, where does that come from? Like, because not everyone gets into a game the same way. Maybe they just focus on the game itself. But it sounds like you were someone who was really trying to look at the history of the scene. And so, where do you think that comes from? Or
Uh, that's a really good question. I'm honestly not sure. I think I really like to I become pretty obsessive when I find something that I'm interested in, and I just look to absorb whatever information I can about it. And I think like the rivalries throughout the history of a game's lifespan, like a competitive game, are always really intriguing. Um, Definitely the Smash doc, I think, influenced that because that was such a interesting case study of like how that game came to be competitively and the various figures in its history that were important to its development and that sort of thing. And so I just kind of figured that there was something comparable within like the ST scene or just like the retro scene in general. And yeah, it obviously it has an extremely rich history. And so whenever something like that exists, I definitely like to learn about it. And I think that's just a part of, for me, that's just a critical part of being involved with like any subculture. Like I also grew up uh skateboarding, and similarly, you know, the old heads kind of expect you to do your research and to know about certain things. And yeah, like there's just a lot of fun to be had to exploring like those legacies. It's all super interesting, like the personality aspect, the narratives.
so you mentioned that when you first tried Third Strike, it was on 5K1, and you weren't very fond of it. So what turned things around for you?
I think probably just feeling so limited in ST, it just kind of got the better of me, and it made me curious about other avenues of like older games. And I think I was just so attracted to the old games again, like that nostalgia factor. Plus, I'm a sucker for pixel art, the music in the old Capcom fighters, really all the old 2D fighters is incredible too. And I like to play music, so that was an intriguing aspect of it for me as well. And Third Strike just has this undeniable reputation amongst people that don't even play it. Like I remember at the time, like you would see it in lists of like, like the greatest fighting games of all time and that sort of thing. So there was just this air of what's the word? It just has this reputation that's, I don't know. There's just something special about it. It's just heavily revered. And so I think because of that, I figured I ought to give it an honest try. And when 30th came out, even though like I was a couple months late to the launch, I found that it was a lot easier to get matches online. And again, I was kind of bouncing between that and Fightcade 1 and the matchmaking aspect of 30th, even though like the as a platform it was pretty garbage. Like I think we can all agree that 30th collection was not a great way to play that game online. Um but it was what we had at the time. Of course OE still existed, but 30th was just very active. And that's how I met people that would ultimately like defer me to Venkabot's stream, which was really like my first Venkabot stream was like my first community within Third Strike. It was that, and of course, Katie Alpha was one of the first people that I had played on 30th Collection that absolutely just destroyed me so convincingly, and I was like, wow, like this, there's something to this. And it was also just exciting, like as a total noob, to be able to play somebody that was so competent at the game and who was willing to like talk to me. And um at that time, like KD was streaming quite a bit on Twitch and we would run lobbies. Yeah, like some of my formative memories are running lobbies on 30th Collection with KD Alpha, Big Nasty. Sandy Bags was in those lobbies very frequently. Even Tenren would be there. Haribo Fiend as well, aka Dr. Pancake, former Logan Arcade guy.
So it sounds like,
So
yeah, it sounds like your formative years of Third Strike took place online. And it's interesting that you mentioned how when you think back on those formative years, you think back on being part of these lobbies in 30th. Because now that I think back on your competitive career and when I think back on your formative years, you're part of that sort of generation that kind of came up during COVID, it seems. Like, I know you
yes,
were playing before that, but then like when you really started to do those deep dives into the game and started to spend more time with the game, that was really during COVID. And so it just kind of made me think about, of course, COVID was whack and it was a tragedy and so many people suffered through it. But I guess I don't even want to call it, I'm not even comfortable calling it like a silver lining or anything. But when I look back on it now, well, first of all, it's crazy to think, right? COVID was like 4 or 5 years ago. Like it sounds like
so
far away, but it's still pretty recent, if that makes sense,
yeah,
right? Like it felt like an eternity ago, but like it was only like 4 or 5 years ago. But when I think back on it now, like all of the Third Strike players that started playing during COVID, and then of course Fight K2 emerged during that time. And so, yeah, I don't, it's not really a question or anything. I was just kind of, when I was listening to your story, I was thinking, wow, COVID kind of birthed a lot of Third Strike players. Like it was a quite a boon for the competitive scene. But
definitely.
yeah. And so I wanted to kind of go back to how you like to kind of do a deep dive of the history of the game. And so you were kind of talking about, I don't know, maybe like a word you could use is like mystique, I guess. There's always been like a mystique surrounding the game. Like you were mentioning,
Yes.
Third Strike is, at least now, at least in the last 5 years or so, is generally revered, not just within the fighting game community, but just the gaming community in general. A lot of that has to do with Evo Moment 37. A lot of that has to do, like you said, with the aesthetics of the game, the art, the music, the presentation, uh, the fact that Third Strike seems timeless, but at the same time is very much a product of its time and place, right? Like 1999, like right before Y2K, late 90s, early 2000s, and you think about like the hip hop aesthetic and all that. And so it's this
Mm.
weird, like it's timeless, but at the same time, you could also kind of date it in a way. Um, but as someone who kind of like did some research into the scene, were you surprised at all to discover that, like when the game first came out, that it wasn't really that popular? Or is that something like, oh, okay, that makes sense?
No, that definitely shocked me initially that it was, um, kind of perceived as, like, a bit of a dark horse, like, for a lot of people, I think it was just, like, a side game.
Yeah.
Like, people would
Mhm.
just play it just because it was there, you know?
To this day, there are people within the FGC, especially older generations of players, who will make the argument that Third Strike isn't even a Street Fighter game.
Yeah, yeah. A
Um,
lot of the fundamentals that you could kind of translate across entries in the franchise just do not apply.
it's funny, we're still having that conversation now, as much as it pains me to see. I don't know if you caught on Twitter, but I think it might have been K Brad who had mentioned something that happened at Combo Breaker. I think there was a clip of Logan, Chicago Third Strike player. Shout outs to Sylvester, who did super well at Combo Breaker,
Yes,
getting in
shout out
second.
Fredo.
Yeah, and so Sylvester jumped at Chris G. Chris G parried the Shoryu, and I think it might have been K Brad who mentioned something like, "Oh, you do the right thing, you still lose." And I just kind of part of me just kind of groaned because I've been playing the game forever and I've been part of those conversations. I've heard those conversations forever. And it's funny to me that people still view Third Strike in that sort of rigid way, you know?
Yeah,
Like to me, the beauty of Third Strike is that, and that's why it's super interesting that you started with ST and you had mentioned that part of the reason why you gravitated towards Third Strike was because of how, I guess, strict or rigid you felt with 2X. But it's just funny to think that after almost 27 years, 26 years, people are still people are still complaining about the same things about Third Strike.
yeah, it will never end. It will never end. As long as there are people playing Third Strike and it's being streamed, there will always be those stream monsters and people who complain about shit like that. I always think back to there's like that iconic Reddit post from like the Third Strike subreddit that the screenshot floats around every so often. It's like, why attack if you can just parry? It's like, why live if you're just gonna die? It was like the first response to that.
Do you ever wonder how big Third Strike could get? I mean, you talk about subcultures, niche scenes. I think Third Strike qualifies as that. At the end of the day, it's going to be the most current Street Fighter, the flavor of the week, so to speak. But like, have you ever wondered how big Third Strike could get? Especially someone whose introduction to fighting games was Smash and Melee. I mean, when you think of something like Melee, Melee got pretty big for like an older game. Do you ever think of like how big Third Strike could get, or the potential of Third Strike to get to that place?
I definitely have considered that, and it might be selfish of me, but there is certainly a part of me that hopes that it remains uh like somewhat niche and that we continue to have like these grassroots like organized tournament circuits or just tournaments in general. And I think those will always exist. Like, as long as there are people playing Third Strike, there will always be events and occasions where like the heads get together and that sort of thing. But I do think the potential is pretty much like the sky's the limit for this game. It's so entertaining. Like the another aspect of that tired conversation is just like how broken the top tiers are, like between Chun, Yun, and then you're lucky to see a Ken at like the highest level or like a Makoto, that sort of thing. But I do think there's a lot of there's still a lot of third strike to be played, and as long as that is the case, it will always be like extremely entertaining. Like during your episode with Frankie for this, he referred to top eights as sort of like a product, like something that we're trying to sell. And I think it's I don't want to say it's easy to do that with Third Strike, but I think relative to other games, like for example, like there will be doomers people who complain about top tiers and mechanics and how boring top eights are for every single game. But there's just something inherently riveting about the potential for somebody to turn it around in Third Strike. Um, like a great example of that, I think, would be like co-op this year. Um, just that absolutely insane performance of Genki, where he just pulled it back from something that absolutely like looked unwinnable. I think from any situation. It's funny you had mentioned the like the Twitter discourse, in quotes, discourse, because I remember seeing that tweet about like, oh, like they shouldn't have done this versus Genki. They should have done something else. Like it's just like such a risky option, like putting yourself blah blah blah, whatever. But I think what they failed to see is just what is fundamentally built into this game is just like that comeback factor. Like it's not something you activate. It's not a drive rush. It's not fucking heat. It's just a read on your opponent. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's always exciting. So I do think like Third Strike has the potential to be like it absolutely deserves a main stage presence, especially after this past or the last Evo. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I ever really see it getting that spotlight that I think that we all probably think that it deserves. But if nothing else, co-op at Evo Japan is a start. I think that's pretty cool. Like people will always love watching that. Yeah, I don't know. Like I've never been much of an organizer. I'm not good at shit like that. So, obviously salute at all the organizers that have been involved in the Jazzy Circuit and just like any tournament series for that matter. But
Well, neither am I. So, well, and it sounds self-deprecating, but something that I had talked about in other arenas is that one of the reasons why I started Jazzy was you had talked about how there is this mystique about the game and that everyone seems to know about Third Strike. Everyone seems to, whether they play it or not, seem to agree that Third Strike is a good game, quote unquote, the meme. It's a great game. It's revered. It's, all that stuff, that it's exciting to watch. But one thing that's always bothered me is that, everyone knows about Third Strike, but no one knows about the players who are really good at it. And so, you were talking about sort of the value of Third Strike, and it seems like what you're saying is that part of the potential that you see in Third Strike is because of how entertaining it is, because it can be very volatile, unpredictable. But is that compatible with like at least the current esports ecosystem? Like when we think about just sports in general, because I know that a part of you watches professional sports too. And so we're kind of starting to talk a little bit about something other than Third Strike, but I think it's related. Like, I'm not one to be a conspiracy theorist, but when you get into the realm of professional sports, like we were talking about, it becomes not just competition, but also entertainment. But can a game as volatile as Third Strike be marketable? Like, how do you market that volatility? And I guess that's something that I have been thinking about, like you said, as an organizer.
Mm,
because it seems like everyone enjoys watching Third Strike. It's very entertaining. Like you said, it's very unpredictable and very volatile. It's very exciting. But how marketable, I guess, is that?
yeah, and I think the way that Third Strike has produced, like, these moments
Mm-hmm.
throughout the past definitely lends credence to that where, it's not really known for, like, specific tournaments or, like, specific events or, like you said, like, the stories of specific players, but rather just, like, these instances of things that occur in game that are immortalized, and yeah. So, yeah, I definitely kind of agree with you with respect to that, like, but again, that's probably why or a part of why at least, we appreciate it so much is in spite of tiers or, like, formats, there's just always people the right person on the right day can find a way
Yes.
to make something incredible happen.
Any given Sunday.
Any given Sunday, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of any given Sunday, I want to talk a little bit about Jazzy Finale Weekend. You are a finalist again for the second straight year. And so the way that Jazzy Finale Weekend works is that if you are a finalist, you technically don't have to play until Sunday. Like, what are your thoughts on just the tournament series?
I'm definitely a huge fan. I think the the idea of qualifying by way of points is definitely a little bit polarizing, I've noticed. Like, some people are really into it and some people think it's silly or whatever, but I think my favorite aspect about that is how it encourages folks to travel, like, to visit other scenes, to visit other arcades, to hang out with, just people maybe that they haven't played before and, uh, discover their inner Ryu, like, their inner world warrior. Like, I think last year was a huge year of traveling for me. Like, I went to Colorado, I made the drive to India a couple of times, I went to the Carolinas. Obviously, I competed at Logan Arcade, and I got to play so many different people, at so many different skill levels, and, I got to meet people in person for the first time. I There are certainly some omissions from that year where I wish I could have gone. Like, I really wanted to go to New York because 'cause I've never been there explicitly to play Third Strike. The only time I've ever gone to Texas to play Third Strike was for the finale in 2022, that was my first one. Um But yeah, I don't know. I like that there are multiple different ways to qualify. I like that are now there's now a means to qualify by way of online because there are extremely strong players that don't have the whatever, like, the physical mobility, or maybe it's due to proximity that they are not able to travel to, like, ranking events or auto qualifiers, like Boa, of course, being the prime example. They qualified via online last season and showed out like crazy during top 16 finals day. So I'm a proponent of just, like, the accessibility, like, giving players the opportunity to qualify through different means. And yeah, I feel like that's the whole point of a tournament circuit, is to just allow people from different locales to show what they're made of.
So, what are your thoughts on the weekend itself? You qualified last year, so are you going to do anything differently this year? Like what was that weekend like for you in 2024, knowing that you had already qualified through ranking events? Like what was your approach last year, and is it going to be different this year?
Yeah, I think if there's anything that I need to work on just as an individual, it's probably, like, my approach on the days of the tournament and, like, leading up to the tournament. I The mental fortitude aspect is something that I think I struggle with. Having that strength to stay solid and, like, have a strategy and adhere to it, like, on the big stage. I'm a bit of a choke artist is what I'm trying to say. So I think my approach will be a little bit different this year in terms of like how I allocate my time. There's absolutely no way I'm going to miss watching the LCQ pools because that's probably my favorite part of the finale weekend. It's just so exciting and I get to watch all of my friends play and just see how they perform in the bracket. Maybe like give them some coaching like in between matches or like help them prepare for like a specific person. And of course, just seeing everybody come out in droves for that sort of thing is just so exciting and probably like the most enriching part of being involved in this in the community is Saturday, like for sure. LCQ day is amazing. I love the team tournament too, you know, as a former team tournament Jazzy champion, which
Yeah, we
I
put in
put
a
up on
lot of
it
work.
absolutely nothing.
Well, no one did less work than I did at the team tournament last year.
As it should have been, as it should have been.
No, it's really cool that even as someone who qualified and even as someone who is a finalist and he doesn't have to play on Sunday, that you mentioned how LCQ is really your favorite part of the weekend because yeah, I think it's the LCQ has so many sick matches, especially as it gets towards the end of the pool. Everyone kind of the magnitude, the significance of the matches start to really amplify when
Mhm.
players start going, "Wow, I'm a couple games away from making it to Sunday," and then it really starts to get super interesting. You were talking about how one of the more rewarding things about the the weekend is being able to roll with your friends, with your scene, people in your local community. And so I wanted to ask you, what is it like being part of the Chicago Third Strike scene?
Where do I even begin with the Logan Arcade?
Yeah.
Or I just the Chicago scene in general. I will so my first tournament for Third Strike was Frosty 2019, and I didn't know anybody. Like, I the only person I knew would have been, Nipperman Josh, who, played Urian at the time, and I've kind of a silly story about how I met him, actually. So, while I was preparing for Frosty, you know, with it being my first tournament, I was trying to get an idea of, like, what the vibe would be like, what the setups would be like, where it would be held, and so I was watching past Frosties, and I think it was, like, maybe Frosty 2017 or something like that, where Josh was in top 8, and, I think Brian, aka, Bathtub Leviathan, was on comms, and he had mentioned that Josh was from the city where I'm from, which is not I'm not from Chicago, I don't live in Chicago. I'm about an hour and 30 east, and I remember being on Facebook and I saw in my recommended like, in my recommended friends, this dude, and I think, in his picture, he was, like, sitting down at a cab or something like that, or and so I clicked his profile and I saw that he had got top 3 in Sailor Moon at EVO, and I was like, "Oh, fuck, like, I think this is that dude." And so just on a whim, I messaged him. It was like, "Hey, you know, like, I know this is kinda weird, but, you know, like, I saw you in top 8 for Third Strike, like, I'm just getting into the game. Like, do you still live here?" You know, that sort of thing. And, that's my guy now, you know, like, that's one of my really good friends, just in general, like, regardless of Third Strike. Like, I love Josh, and, he kind of introduced me to, like, the Logan crew because 'cause he'd already been going, you know, he'd been playing Third Strike for quite some time by then. But, I got eliminated Frosty that year by Mr. Part 2, which, like, the idea of playing another Ibuki in tournament was, like, so sick to me because I hadn't seen like, I was watching people play. I met KD Alpha at Frosty that year. I met Big Nasty, who had already been playing online at 30 Floppies and all that shit. But, not long after that, I went to Logan for the first time and just got cooked, just got destroyed, like, got my ass beat, barely won any games. But everybody was just so kind and, like, so sweet, and, Mr. Part 2, obviously like the number one sweetheart of all time. He had remembered me from Frosty and, like said what's up and all that. And they just welcomed me with open arms despite not necessarily being from Chicago. And yeah, they claimed me. So beyond like the online communities that I was a part of, like I will always consider Katie Alpha my first and really only like mentor in the scene. But the Logan Arcade guys, they were just so kind. They're such cool people, extremely welcoming and accommodating, and their enthusiasm for the game. Like for folks that have never been to Logan, it's primarily like a pinball arcade. Like the pinball and this game called Killer Queen. Those are like the main draws. And of course it's a bar. Hella people come out there to drink and shit. But they got the cabs in the back, lined up on the brick walls, and those guys go out there every single Friday. Like they are just such a dedicated bunch. And I just feel extremely fortunate to have such a dope scene. People that I can talk to about whatever, that we have like similar interests outside of Third Strike. And yeah, they're just such a sick bunch. Like I highly, highly recommend. Can I recommend enough? If anybody's ever in the Chicagoland area and they want to get some games, hit up Mr. Part 2 or like really any of us, and we'll make sure that people come out and get games with you. Especially if it's on a Friday, like they'll just be there anyway. Like they'll just be there ready to fuck shit up. Yeah, I'm extremely grateful for them.
How much of what makes your scene special, how much of that can you attribute to the fact that Logan is an arcade? It is a barcade, but it's kind of still an arcade. Like if you go to Logan and you want to play Third Strike, you have the cab, you have to actually put quarters in the cab, you have to wait your turn. Like, because you had talked about how you got into video games, and it seems like from your story, your main exposure was through console gaming and PC gaming. But how much of what makes the Chicago scene special, how much of that can you attribute to the fact that you guys play at an arcade?
Yeah, being that I'm not somebody that grew up playing in arcades like at all. I think probably where I live actually there is an arcade. It's called Nickel World. I don't know if it still exists, but they've got like some fighting games there, but mostly like classic stuff, and each game costs a nickel. I'd maybe been there once or twice. Or like, an arcade in a mall or some shit like that. Um, but I attributed heavily like just the liveliness of our scene to the fact that there is a spot that we can all reliably pull up to on the same day of every week. And you mentioned the bit about the fact that you have to actually put quarters in the cab and like wait your turn, and there's a rotation and there's kind of like unspoken rules and that sort of shit. There's something about a community and like how critical those little rituals are. And it's just a part of it that I look forward to, like when I go there. Like I definitely do not travel to Logan as frequently as I wish I could, or as much as I would like to, I should say. But I do really like being there. The staff of the arcade is great. Like they've been extremely accommodating to Third Strike because I think they see the passion. And I've had conversations with Jose Tough Gnarl about this in the past. Like for example, after the Logan Auto-Qualifier this year, we had, we were smoking outside and kind of just chopping it up about like how sick this thing that we have is, and just how important it is to us. And yeah, just like acknowledging all the new folks that come in and that like consistently show up and all that stuff. And yeah, if not for Logan, I really don't know. Like I don't know what I really can't picture like a Chicago Third Strike scene if not for Logan Arcade. I had mentioned earlier, like we used to have the Candy Cave, which was in a suburb of Chicago, but it was kind of out of the way, I think, for the guys that live in Chicago proper. And I love that place because I didn't have to deal with the Chicago traffic. And plus, they had like this dope Mexican restaurant that had like amazing food. But like I said, I can't picture Chicago Third Strike if not for Logan. And I imagine that's the case for a lot of the scenes just like around the country. And of course, in Japan as well, you know, like those arcades are pillars, literally, of these people to come out and hang out with each other. And they're like a reprieve from the rest of life, I'm sure, like a sanctuary almost. Not to get preachy or anything, but yeah, the First Church of Third Strike, it's pretty apt that we have our monthlies on Sundays. But yeah, you know, it's where we go to worship. Gotta have that.
Everyone has their thing. Everyone has their faith, and you just happen to put your faith in Third Strike. So with that said, Mark, what do you think? Because this is a question that I've been asking all of the finalists so far. You know, Third Strike, kind of going back to your comments about your set with Poe and how you feel like Poe is very unpredictable. I think the reason why Poe is unpredictable is because, and I think this is not, like you said, this is not necessarily a weakness. It can be a strength. It's so ironic to me that the subtitle of Third Strike is Fight for the Future, because to me, I think a huge part of being successful in a game like Third Strike is being able to stay in the moment. Because that helps you react quickly, that helps you adapt, that helps you think quickly and to be creative. I think that's a lesser discussed aspect of Third Strike that I wish we had a lot of time to talk about. To me, like, the game feels a lot more creative than other games. But like, it's always ironic to me that the game is called Fight for the Future, because I think a big part of Third Strike is being able to be in the moment. But with that said, like, what do you think the future of Third Strike will look like?
I hope that we can retain as many of the arcades around the country as possible. So of course, go to your locals, visit your arcades, show them your support, and of course we have like the platforms such as Fightcade 2, which I mean I don't know how long that will exist for, but I'm sure as long as there are people playing retro games, there will be a means to play online. Um, Obviously, gathering together in real life, playing on arcade hardware is the truth. It's the ideal way to experience the game, like, with the community, and I don't know, I think as of right now, like, the future looks pretty bright for the game. There are new people popping up every day. Um, I think our scene is pretty welcoming when it comes to newer folks, like, people that ask questions and are genuinely curious about, like, how they might get better. We're all pretty we're all pretty good about just entertaining that sort of thing because I think we understand and we can spot when somebody is like truly interested and when they're willing to put the time and the effort in. Because it's a demanding game to try to get good at. Like I've put in thousands of hours at this point, and I still feel like a scrub a lot of the time. But I look at players like the Nom, for example. I think he's probably like our number one case study at this point of what the future of the game could be, if we can reach the right audience through like our presentation and, for example, of things like Jazzy, and if we can just continue to make it look as appealing as it actually is, which it totally is, dude. Like the finale, the ranking events during the season, the fact that this exists at all is just a testament to the strength of the passion and dedication that people that really fuck with this have for it. Um, so I will hope to continue to contribute in any way that I can. Right now, I'm kind of just relegated to being a participant, like a player, and I almost feel like a bystander in that way. You know, like it makes me want to develop my organizational skills so that I can, so that I can, you know, one day contribute in like a more meaningful way. which is not to say that the players and the participants are not, because they are. They're such a huge part of it, but I don't know. I have a lot of hope for the future of the game, and I kind of like what Bubbles said during his episode with you is that he intends on being an old man playing Third Strike, and I certainly hope to be doing the same. And I would love for that to be at Logan Arcade of all places, or I'd love to link up at Akihabara because that arcade is godlike as well, or just wherever. I think I think it's in good hands.
I think the future is bright too, especially if players like you are going to be a part of it. And so, yeah, thanks again for the time. If you want to see Yogurt Brain compete, tune in to Jazzy Finale Weekend, June 20th to 22nd. Or, better yet, right, Mark? Come and join us. You too could find yourself on the opposite end against Yogurt Brain. Enter the last chance qualifier. You could still qualify. You could still make it to Sunday, which is super sick. Personally, for me, Sunday is my favorite part of the weekend, but I could totally understand why you would see LCQ because it's almost kind of like sadistic in a way, right? Like like
Yeah.
especially if you don't have to be at LCQ and you're just like watching it and you're like, "Oh man, like this is kind of one or done," like even though it's double limb, but like it's you got a winner, you're not going to make it to Sunday, but I think the whole weekend is sick. Teams, LCQ, the finale, the side events. Maybe we'll see you enter ST, your original game. Who knows? But yeah, thanks again, Yogurt Brain, and good luck at the finale. And we'll see you all there.